Alright, hello, I'm live. Okay, so recently there was animal rights stuff, and I wrote this summary post about what happened. So, very briefly, uh, I posted my animal rights discussion tree with Peter Singer material to 5 places. Then someone else started posting it places, and I posted it more places, and it got in total, it was posted at 16 places. Reddit, Stack Exchange, forums that come up when you Google animal rights, and some other places, Quora. So 16 places, plus on top of that, I went to a vegan Discord from a guy who debates people on YouTube called Ask Yourself. And he's specifically really into vegan stuff, so I went there. And he banned me for AFKing for 30 seconds after saying I was going to fix an audio issue, and the guy said okay. And then I did that, and then he banned me, and when he was, during the 30-second window, which I didn't even see his message, someone else in his chat told him, here he is streaming and he's setting up his stream, just hang on. And then he just banned me anyways. So fucking ridiculous, doesn't want to debate, closed to ideas. Those people were like ridiculous anyways, because I talked to them in text a little, and they really wanted to use voice. They don't want to use literature sources, they just want to laugh at you and call you Descartes. Because there's a similarity between your position and Descartes' position. Anyway, so the animal rights debate. So posted at 16 places and went to the vegan Discord, so 17 places. And long story short, literally 0 answers that gave relevant literature that answered my basic question. My question was basically, do you have any scientific evidence documenting animal behavior that is incompatible with the following claim? Animals are complex biological robots. They don't have minds, they can't suffer, they're not conscious, they're not intelligent, they don't learn, they don't have general intelligence, etc. Show me some documented animal behaviors that don't fit that model. That they're just like advanced self-driving cars, Roombas, video game characters, etc. So I literally got not a single piece of relevant literature, and no one had any counter arguments. Most people, rather than giving literature, they just wanted to debate me. Like I'm like, do you have any literature showing X? And they're just like, well, I'm gonna make some Reddit comments and argue with you. Anyway, so there were quite a few number of people who linked sources to me, who cited papers and books and stuff. And what I did with these is I searched for words like software, hardware, algorithm, and compu, which when you search, it's good to leave off the endings of words. So this compu will match computer, but it'll also match computation. So it's like searching for 2 things at once. And also match compute, so 3 things at once. And computed, so 4 things at once. And computing, so 5 things at once. So it matches like all the different word endings. So anyways, you search for those things and you get like 0 relevant results, sometimes literally 0 results. You're like, okay, this is clearly not discussing whether animals follow software algorithms that compute what behaviors they do, you know? And a lot of the people were clearly not versed in certain expert knowledge, like the Turing principle, and that computation is software independent. And a lot of them denied that brains are computers, but had no alternative view and didn't understand the issues, and certainly didn't link to literature from someone who knows what they're talking about and actually had a sensible position on the matter where they could debate and claim brains are something other than computers. And then when I tried to say minds are software, again, no one even seemed to understand the claim, and they certainly didn't know of any expert literature that knows what those words mean and then could respond to it and disagree with it, or agree with it and say how that's compatible with veganism. If you want to know about the Turing principle, read The Fabric of Reality by David Deutsch. There are a couple of people who seem to have read Deutsch before, or to know something about the Turing principle or something, but they still were like very silly. It didn't seem to help, which was sad. The Turing stuff is basically that there are universal computers that can compute everything that can be computed by a computer. So all the computers have the same repertoire of what calculations they can do. Like Macs, PCs, iPhones, Androids, Linux, Intel CPUs, ARM CPUs, Motorola CPUs, all can do the same calculations. The CPU in my microwave has the same repertoire of calculations. So you can't differentiate different animals or animals and humans based on the brain being able to calculate things for humans but not animals, all of them have universal classical computer brains. That part, by the way, sounds pretty good for the animal rights people, if that's as far as you go in analyzing. But none of them seem to understand that or be able to talk about it. But yeah, humans can create knowledge, whereas animals can't. Humans are universal knowledge creators, and animals are not knowledge creators at all, which is typical with a jump to universality of being able to either do it or not do it. Just like with computers, there aren't like 50% computers that are like can do half the things. Computers go straight from almost zero features to every single feature in terms of what it can compute. But none of them understood that or engaged with it. And none of them had. But see, I wanted to keep it simpler and ask just, so the AGI field, the artificial general intelligence researchers are trying to create a general intelligence. So they have a concept of a general intelligence as opposed to not a general intelligence. So the question that I really wanted to ask them and that I thought would be easier to understand is there anything an animal has ever done to indicate it has general intelligence instead of lacking general intelligence? Like, is there any behavior that would require general intelligence that an animal has done? And there were no answers to that, no literature. And what a decent chunk of people said back to that was, I'm not convinced that humans have general intelligence. Prove to me that humans are better than robots. Prove to me that humans can think. Prove to me that humans deserve any moral worth or welfare or anything. Prove to me that humans can suffer. Which, it's hard to tell how much that's just a dishonest debating tactic and how much it's they actually don't understand the value of humans. But like, if you don't understand the value of humans, that should fucking disturb you, and you should like want an answer. You shouldn't just be throwing that around as a debating tactic. You should be like, holy shit, this is a problem with my worldview. Like, they just seem to be gloating, like, if I can attack humans and bring them down to the level of animals and robots, then it proves animals are great and important just as much as humans, and they just see how that like helps the animal cause. They seem to lose sight of what that means for humans, and that's like a real problem for civilization. Okay, so I concluded that there's like a lack of discussion and debate in the world and lack of interest in it. I thought that a lot of the discussions with the vegans and animal rights advocates was representative. It fits my experience trying to bring up other topics with other people. I think it's really sad, but I just find that non-FI forums are kind of like that in general. And third, animal rights advocates broadly don't know anything about computers and software and haven't tried to update their thinking to take that stuff into account. Sad. And anyways, I think the discussion tree approach is good, and I encourage people to do that. And you could do something kind of like what I did. Pick a topic, make a discussion tree, see if anyone can give counter-arguments, can add nodes to your tree. By a variety of forums, including FI. So I'm hoping people will actually do that. I think it would be a good idea. So here's the original discussion tree I made. So at the beginning we've got Peter Singer, and then I've got some comments on his position, and then we have also some of the things he said, and then there's more that he said on my response, and so on, and there's back and forth, and then here's a second paper by him. Because I was like, this is old, maybe he updated based on like modern info about computers that's more recent than 1973. So he wrote something in 2003, but then I look at it and he didn't update, and then I recorded what some of his arguments were and asked some questions, and I pointed out, the main thing I pointed out is that Peter Singer's arguments were incomplete. That was the main purpose of this tree, and I was hoping that people would have some sources I could add to my tree to make it more complete. Even if they were wrong, at least like, what is the next argument, how did they try to address this, and then I'll say what's wrong with it and so on. But I literally couldn't get any answers that were worth adding to the tree. But I think the tree itself is a very good idea. You should try it. And if you want to try it, I'm using the app MindNode. Anyway, so here's the second one I made. This is after I talked with people a bunch. I decided to make a diagram for some of the stuff that they kept bringing up, which is somewhat different stuff. So there were like 3 main branches. So is it okay to breed and slaughter cows and chickens? Yes, because animals don't have moral importance like humans. That's like the beginning. And then there's 3 main answers I got from people. Actually, this is not something that many of them said, but it's something I think that they should try to say, like it's worth a try. Animals have moral value because they're intelligent. Then what a lot of them say is animals have moral value because they can suffer. And then a lot of them say animals have moral value because they're conscious. Sometimes they say sentient. Sometimes they say can feel pain. They tend to use the words pain and suffering fairly interchangeably, and they don't really try to think through what they mean and differentiate things like nerve signals versus mental reactions and like interpretations in the mind and opinions and stuff like that in terms of pain and suffering. Like, pain is a physical process of nerve signals sending information to the brain, or like painful thoughts, painful state of mind. They don't really differentiate if pain is a physical state of the body or a like software state of the mind or something different, because they don't think in those terms, so they can't really answer or discuss anything productively. But anyways, so I made this tree with these 3 different main parts, and then I went through and answered them with a bunch of branches. So like here, I'm like, I say this, and then there's a yes, go on, and there's 2 different reasons they say no. And if I say this, then they say yes, and I say yes, and there's a yes and a no answer. So I was going through, like, here's a no answer, and here's a no answer. Like, I was going through and trying to give, here are a lot of the arguments people make, and then here's the counter argument, and so on, and organize it. So I made this, and I got, 0 responses that engage with it. The first one also, I got 0 responses that actually engaged with the tree I made. They were never like, here is a specific node you said, let me quote a sentence you said in that node, and then let me give you a response that I think is a response worthy of being in your tree as a response to that node. Like, they never did that a single time. They were never specific about what they're arguing with. I asked them repeatedly, like a bunch of people, I was like, could you point out which node you disagree with? Or there were a couple threads I made also using this one. So I said, in the comments below, reply saying which is the first sentence you disagree with and why you disagree. People are very bad at following instructions and were largely unwilling to do this. Some of them would say things like, you didn't argue your case, you just made statements. It's like, right, I was trying to state my view to find out what we disagree about. And then if you tell me the first thing you disagree about, I will argue why I'm right and you're wrong. But they wouldn't do that or couldn't do that. Or some of them, they just got stuck on the first sentence, minds are software, which it's not really that they disagreed with it, they just don't understand what computers are enough to know what that means. Oh, there's a reason for the suffering thing. I mean, there's probably multiple reasons, and you might be partly right, but that comes up in Singer in 1973, and I think a lot of people are just following him. Like, his animal liberation article is really influential. So I think he kind of spread the idea. And the reason he goes for focusing on suffering, not intelligence, it makes sense. It's plausible from a perspective. Like, I don't agree with that knowing CR and stuff, but I can see why it would seem reasonable to people. And the issue is, in their view, intelligence is a matter of degree. So like, humans are 100 points of intelligence. Well, I shouldn't use 100 because it's not like a maximum, it's just a matter of degree on a scale. So humans are like 230 points of intelligence, and then dogs are like 120 points of intelligence, and then rats are like 75 points of intelligence. So they view the world kind of like that. And if you view the world that way, it's hard to pick a cutoff point. Like, why arbitrarily, when you reach 173 points of intelligence, do you suddenly have moral worth, and before that you didn't? So to them, it makes sense to say that animals have less moral worth, but still some, because this stuff is a matter of degree. So that's how they see intelligence. And the view of intelligence that way is like really quite common. So I don't think that reveals that they're terrible people for thinking that or something like that. So their answer to that is picking an amount of intelligence that grants moral value is arbitrary. Therefore, we should look for something else. For example, can it suffer? If it can suffer, then we shouldn't make it suffer, which seems kind of reasonable. A lot of the focus is on suffering, but they do sometimes mention pleasure as well on the flip side. Like, if it can feel pleasure, then it matters whether it feels pleasure or not. I think they often see that as related and assume, like, if it can feel pain or suffering, then also it can feel pleasure, and how much pleasure it has and how much lack of suffering it has both matter. But they do usually talk about suffering. By the way, people use the word sentient sometimes, which is kind of a vague word. Like, you might think that they mean consciousness by it, in which case they should just say consciousness. However, someone defined to me saying sentient meant capable of feeling pain, which I thought was a really weird definition for the word sentient. But it played into that emphasis on suffering. Anyways, my answer to all this is humans are qualitatively different in terms of intelligence. They have general intelligence, whereas animals do not. And if I was going to go into more detail, I would say that humans can create knowledge, whereas animals do not create knowledge. Knowledge creating processes, in short, are evolution. Knowledge is created by replication with variation and selection. So biological evolution is a knowledge creating process, but animals don't do evolution themselves. Like, they're born with the knowledge from evolution, but then during their life, the animal doesn't learn anything, it doesn't create new knowledge. Humans, however, our minds, our brains, our mental software is capable of evolving ideas. So we do replication with variation and selection of ideas, and no animals do that. So we're able to evolve new knowledge during our lifetimes, whereas animals can't. But just even setting that aside, you can say things like humans have general intelligence and animals don't. Like, you can find ways to look at intelligence as a binary trait. And also, you can say humans have intelligence in a sense that rocks do not. And even if you're going to lump dogs in with humans, you could still have a binary trait there and say, like, humans and dogs both have some sort of intelligence that a rock doesn't and a tree doesn't. So you can differentiate human and dog from rock and tree. Like, that's not wrong. It's not a full analysis, but it isn't wrong. So the focus on only matters of degree is bad, I think, but very common. You know, the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness was an appeal to authority I got several times. And it makes like logic errors and shows blatant ignorance of computation stuff. But there was this comment I got from someone. This was signed by just 12 scientists. They couldn't get more than that. Seems to indicate that most disagree, ? Elsewhere, one of the signatories contradicts the declaration. So that was an amusing comment. That's something that came up in Linson videos. So he pointed out there's he might have done it with two different ones. So there's these like pro-global warming statements, and they'll get like 100 scientists to sign it. And he said if you look at the names on the list, a bunch of them are not experts in the field, they're just some other type of scientist. And then if you look at the ones who are experts in the field, and then you go look at what they wrote elsewhere, you'll find that they contradict the declaration. And he gave some examples of actual climate scientists who had signed the declaration saying things that contradict it. Because the declarations are always like, global warming is totally real and we're certain of it. And then when these people actually do work in the field, they don't want to be like incompetents who got fired, so they have to say things that are truer than that. Like, we don't actually know how cloud feedbacks work all that well. There's a lot of uncertainty here. So it contradicts their propaganda declarations. You have to read it and it makes actual sense. I've done this before. Maybe it was with someone else. It was the global warming debate, wasn't it? Where I linked to the chemistry study. There's plenty of good science. It's just not in the social sciences, and it's not in nutrition. I think it was the global warming. This one. Here we go. I'll give you this link. So this is a paper I found. It was literally the first one I found when I was searching for an example of science that wasn't trash. Because they said, do you have an example of a paper that meets that standard? Could be in any field. And I said David's physics papers, and then I found this one by searching for the words chemistry and atoms and then clicking on something. And this one was called Recent Advances in the Chemistry of Electronically Excited Atoms. If you look, it's from 1970, and if you look through it, it seems like pretty fucking legit. And then if you compare this to a correlation study on diabetes, it's not very similar. And this is not like a particularly CR paper. Like, I don't remember noticing anything CR about it. But then there's a thing I quoted on a little bit. Oh, this was something interesting. So the person said the first 3 sentences and their brain checked out already. That's not necessarily a bad sign. Like, if there's technical jargon that's hard to understand, that can be a sign of like real science. Like, they actually know what they're talking about. But you can try to tell the difference between technical jargon you don't understand, which is how chemistry stuff looks to me, some of it, and technical jargon like the social sciences use, where they just make up a bunch of stupid words to make their text more confusing. But you can actually translate it into simple words and see that it's empty. Anyways, it specifically had this part where it was basically saying, before we go into details, we're going to tell you how to judge and think about the details. So they're giving like info that helps the reader understand what they're saying, which is one of the things I said a good paper would have. And then that paper happened to have it. I assume there are some good ones for like does vitamin A help avoid blindness or something? I think there's some decent knowledge of some of the vitamins being useful. Vitamin C, vitamin D, like those are studied a decent amount, right? So I would look at something like that that's like less controversial and like seems to make sense and stuff. Like if you're missing some of the vitamins, some bad things can happen to your body, like that makes sense. And then people could study what they are. Like similarly, iodine. I've heard that we need iodine and that's why we put iodine in table salt. So there's probably some papers on why iodized salts is important or something. You go like scholar.google.com and you type in like iodized salt. And then you see a paper like risks of iodine-induced hyperthyroidism after correction of iodine deficiency by iodized salt. There's a decent chance this paper will be okay. However, it doesn't appear to have a free PDF, so like I could sci-hub this, but I'm just going to go to the next one. So prevention of endemic gouter with iodized salt. This paper describes a study carried out over 16 years. Hey, that's pretty good. They're like putting fucking effort into this. Of the use of iodized salt for control of endemic goiter in a valley of the Himalayan foothills. From 1956, salt was fortified with either potassium iodide or potassium iodate, providing an estimated daily intake of 200 something or other, some amount. It's a measure, like, I don't think that's milligrams. It's probably like the one under milligrams or something. I don't know what it is. Could be milligrams. Milligrams is just mg though, I think. It's probably like the one under that. I think you need like very tiny amounts of iodine. I think 200 milligrams might be like too much, but I'm not really sure. There was a progressive and significant decline in goiter prevalence, together with a return of the pattern of iodine metabolism to within normal limits. It is concluded that it works. So this is a correlation, but it's reasonable, and there is, I believe, as background, some understanding of how iodine matters. But even if there isn't, it's a completely plausible thing that like our body uses iodine. It's not hard to make up an explanation that makes sense. Our body needs various nutrients as inputs so it can build like cells and whatever out of them. A keto diet or a vegan diet on health outcomes would be very hard to study. That'd be far harder than this. And you're going to have a lot of conflicting factors. Like you can kind of imagine that lifestyle factors don't affect that much whether you get a gouter or not. Like it could just be the iodine pretty much. I don't know if they did a control or not. I haven't read this yet, but whereas with like the keto diet or the vegan diet or whatever, like people on a vegan diet are probably like more likely to exercise or something like that, you know? Like people are trying hard in regards to diet will also try hard in regards to exercise, and they'll go to the doctor more and whatever else. Like it's similar to how there are these studies that correlate like drinking wine with good health or something. It's like the type of middle class people who are drinking like a cup of red wine with dinner are just on average going to be healthier because drinking a cup of red wine with dinner is like associated with higher socioeconomic status, like not being a poor idiot, and it is associated with like certain lifestyles and values and stuff that just tend to be a bit healthier than some other people. Like you probably don't get a lot of like really poor people being vegan. Being vegan is probably and keto probably both associated with being like middle class at least. So that's going to be a major confounding variable. You can try to control for it. You could be like, well, we're going to compare these vegan diets to like random people from the middle class. But it's like hard to control. It's hard to define middle class and like find people in it accurately. And you're going to have problems like, okay, so vegans are probably less likely to smoke or something. Vegans are probably less likely to be obese and overeat. So like factors like that are going to mess it up even if you only compare to other middle class people. Vegans are probably more likely to be young. You're going to have like age as a factor, and like there's so many things. Vegans are probably more likely to be women, if I had to guess. I don't know. Could be wrong. How do you objectively choose your diet? In my opinion, like broadly, we have a lot of healthy foods and they're all good. I think people are overly concerned about it. I think it's quite easy to get nutritious food in a variety of ways. Like you just don't have to try that hard. And just don't eat when you're not hungry and don't overeat on quantity. And you should probably be okay. I think it takes like quite a bit of work or like very peculiar dietary habits. to like manage to just, get no vitamin A or something, like cause a deficiency. You have to be careful if you're vegan, because like not eating any meat or eggs or whatever is actually a peculiar dietary habit with a risk of causing a vitamin deficiency or something. But if you eat like a normal foods, a variety of foods, you should be fine. There's a couple specific exceptions, like maybe there's a lot of people with magnesium shortages or iron shortages or vitamin D. I forget which of those ones, but there's like certain things that normal diets don't necessarily do a great job with, a couple of them. So like vitamin supplements or blood work monitoring or whatever for those specific things could be reasonable. Especially if there's a problem associated with one of those deficiencies that you have, that would be a good reason to check. I think a wide variety of diets are just fine and normal and about as good as other ones, and if there isn't great info about which are better than others, like you don't need to optimize it. If your body needs food, it needs a bunch of different vitamins. If you get them, it should be okay. It's quite a robust system in this regard. So I don't think you need to worry about the details. I think the people who think like if you eat a little bit different diet, you'll like suddenly have a lot more energy and be super healthy and whatever, like I think that's just bullshit, and that diet doesn't have that big of an effect. Like diet has a big effect if you like overeat by a lot, undereat by a lot, or like never get any iodine, or never don't get enough vitamin A because 70% of your diet is rice of the non-golden variety. Things like that make a big difference. But I think most diets just don't make that big a difference. I'd stay away from vegan diet though. I'd stay away from keto. I would just eat a variety of things. I mean, unless you like hate carbs or something. Like I think it's okay to eat on the high side of meat if you want to, like more than the average person. If you like it, that's fine. But I wouldn't go like super hardcore into keto. I wouldn't recommend that. Especially not for like health purposes. If you're doing it for diet purposes, it's a bit different. The reason a lot of the diet things work is they just restrict what you can eat. Like if you can only eat some foods and not others, then you tend to eat less. And it like breaks people's normal rhythms, and like if you can only eat meat, not bread, then it prevents certain snacks. So like you snack less. It's stuff like that. People have like eating habits, and then a lot of these diets like break their habit and get them to eat differently, which causes some of their overeating to not happen. Because when your eating isn't hunger based enough, you can just like cut out some snacks if your like schedule changes sort of, and then not replace them because you're not hungry. It's not actually a problem. People have a lot of eating habits, like 3 meals a day with rough meal times plus snacks plus having like drinks with their meals like sodas, and a lot of those habits involve overeating. Or a lot of what happens to people is it's okay when they're like 15, and then as they get older they keep the same eating habits and then they start getting fatter. So for people who have that problem and they're chronically overeating by habit, things like a keto diet or a variety of other things that are like significantly restrictive in some way can like break their habits and make them eat in a different way, which can help. But it's not really the best way to do it. It's just something that can work for a lot of people without them actually understanding what their problem is, without challenging a lot of their like standard thinking. Just from the claim, I would say it's crap research before I even read a word of it. Like, I would be very suspicious, but alright, let's see. Okay, so it's mice. Mice, not humans. I don't think mice are a super accurate proxy for this. I don't know how bad they are. If this was a really good study, I think they might tell me how bad they are. Like, how good or bad of a proxy are mice for this is something the study should probably be telling me, instead of leaving me to guess. I suspect they're leaving me to guess because they're hoping I'll overestimate how good a proxy mice are for humans and like assume it's just a good proxy, and they just mention mice once and move on. Maybe. We'll see. Oh, this isn't the study. It looks sort of like one up here, but this is just a news article. So if I was going to evaluate this, I would find the actual study journal reference. So here's the actual study. I'm not going to read the journal. This is just some like reporter. Anyways, this is just some reporter writing an article and like summarizing the research. It's much harder to tell if the research is any good when it's translated by some idiot reporter. So sometimes they don't even link like the actual info, but in this case they did, so that's good. That makes it easier. So I'll share the actual link in YouTube chat. I want to get this so I can see if there's a new Discord message. So this will do. Now I can see the bottom clearly. Okay, so our immune responses to infections are influenced by several extrinsic factors. By extrinsic, I think it's just a fancy-ass word for external. External, first synonym. Not part of the essential nature, coming from the outside, lying outside, arising outside. Yeah. Anyways, okay, so external factors including weather, social interactions, and diet. So the first thing I noticed about this sentence is the word influenced. By influenced, they mean correlated with. It's one of the many words that they use to say correlated with without saying it. So these are not causal factors. This does not mean that weather or, quote, social interactions or diet causes different immune responses to influenza or to infections. I guess this said infections, even though this thing was about flu. So here we see correlation and things where they have no causal mechanism that they are going to explain, I'm pretty sure. They're saying weather correlates with something. What's the causal mechanism from weather to immune responses? What are social interactions? Like, how do you even define social interactions? Like, they're not talking about small talk, like they're studying mice. So just like being in the same cage with another mouse, or like sniffing the other mouse's butt. Like, how many times per day do you sniff the other mouse's butt? Is that social interactions? Do mice sniff each other's butts like dogs do? I don't even know. Maybe not. But like, right, so how are they actually measuring social interactions? And what is the causal mechanism from those? If there's a causal mechanism from those, it might be like higher stress responses or like more cortisol or some shit. And then some causal mechanism from there. And this is diet, so that's quite a big vague thing. Anyways. Wait, lethal influenza infection? But influenza is a virus, and infection refers to bacteria, I thought. Am I wrong? Maybe infection is just anything. Virus or bacteria? Is the flu caused by a bacterial or viral infection? Okay, I guess infection might just be both. Alright, the word infection is just generic. Alright, fine. They're looking at the immune response in the lungs and some sort of cell. What the fuck is that? Y Greek character T. Can you just Google these? Delta. Y delta T cells. Using mice lacking Y delta T cells, the authors have established the functional importance of these cells in conferring protection. Oh, so they compare mice that just don't have those cells at all and see how they do with the flu? And then the mice with the good diet got more of the cells, the mice with the bad diet get fewer of the cells, and the mice with none of the cells, like, die, or whatever, get sick more. Airway epithelial cells? Oh, this is the kind of jargon that I think is legit, like epithelial cells and Y delta T cells. I don't think this is like the social sciences where they just make up stupid words. This seems real to me. Okay, so they give mice keto diets. Supposedly it helps fight the flu in some specific way with lung cells. Or more specifically, it causes more cells or more activated cells or something of a particular type. Which, if you have none of those cells, it's bad for your flu fighting. Which doesn't actually mean more is better. There's lots of stuff where it's really important to have some of it, but more doesn't actually help. So they may have missed that, but I've only like read the sort of summary stuff, so maybe they didn't, who knows. There's a lot of medical terminology that seems like legit, but it makes it harder to understand. That is critical interferon, IFN. Inducible gene important for the control of primary infections in mice. Most inbred mouse strains, however, lack a functional copy. Extremely successful. Okay, so there's signs here that they know some things about what they're talking about. Like, they're talking about certain mice with certain genes succumbing to as few as 100 plaque-forming units, PFU, of this particular flu virus thing. There's a lot of signs here that they actually have some like technical knowledge of what they're doing, and they have lab equipment, and they've isolated different strains and genes and whatever. And they can combine things in test tubes and infect mice with the disease they want to infect them with and see what happens, and so on and so forth. Which is already better than a lot of social science. So there's definitely some signs that they did some science. I'm still very suspicious of their conclusion because it sounds implausible to me. But you can see that this is better than a lot of other studies that are just trash. Like, at least in some ways, they know something. Intranasal challenge. Mice that had been fed KD for 7 days before infection. Okay, so now this is fucking interesting. They're saying keto diet helps with flu, and then their sample mice were fed the keto diet for 7 days, and then they were infected with flu. That's how they did their study. Wait. So you feed them a keto diet for 7 days, then you give them the flu, and then when they have the flu, they have less weight loss. Okay, this is starting to make more sense now. So it sounds to me, and this is completely plausible, like maybe the flu tends to cause weight loss, but to some extent, the way it causes weight loss overlaps with keto diet stuff. The keto diet like already did the thing the flu was about to do to you, something kind of like that. So it's sort of like pre-dosing yourself with some of the flu effects. So you're like your body was already used to them for a week, and then you get the flu, and like that part of it doesn't hit you very hard because you already had a similar thing from the keto diet. It's sort of like you put your body through a trauma. The keto diet was like a trauma, and your body had a week to adjust to that one trauma at a time by itself. So then it dealt with the flu trauma. The flu is like 20 traumas at once, right? So then you got like, you only have to deal with 19 new traumas from the flu instead of 20, so you get better results in some ways. That seems kind of plausible to me, but that's like a very specific situation. It doesn't seem that applicable to humans and to using the keto diet over time. The strength of a solution is determined by titration with a standard substance. The concentration of a substance in a given sample is determined by titration. Concentration of a solution is determined by titration. Okay, so vial titers. Wait, it says noun, the concentration of a solution. Oh, medicine. The concentration of an antibody is determined by finding the highest. Oh, are they saying that viral concentrations were lower? Oh, okay. So it's viral concentrations were lower, and they determined that fact using titration. Alright, I don't know what the fuck that is, but it sounds real. Let's see. Sum total of all messenger RNA molecules expressed from the genes of an organism. Yep, sounds real. Alright, so a bunch of scientific details that are hard to understand. We did not detect differences in bowel response, blah blah blah. Pulmonary bacterial infections. Alright, let's see what they say about causes. Usually the intro and the conclusion are easier to read. I wonder if they provide their data. A lot of studies don't provide their data, which sucks. Doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong, it's pretty common, but it sucks. Like when they just provide these charts, you ought to be able to have the data and like run it through stats programs yourself, because you can be pretty misleading if you only give selective charts. So people need to be able to check your work. No, this isn't their fucking data, these are just their summary charts. Like some of this is good info that they should be sharing, I guess, but they didn't give their actual experimental data. There's no like Excel spreadsheet or CSV or whatever the fuck format with their actual raw data. They just give you the summary chart, so that's bad. So one of the things I'm wondering is, like, did anything else happen to the mice on keto diet? Is the one thing that happened that they had better flu responses? Or did they lose weight? Did they gain weight? Did they show any behavioral differences? Did their heart rates go up or down or stay the same? Like you could look at a lot of things to maybe learn something about if there's a real effect here, what's the causal mechanism? Because you could find out like keto diet caused lowered heart rate, made them more resistant to flu or something. Although they were specifically talking about those lung cells. So what causes like more lung cells or whatever? Oh yeah, I was wondering if you needed like the more the better, or if it was just you need some instead of none. Because they talked about using mice that don't have the gene for it at all. The mechanism by which KD-induced Y delta C cells enhance lung barrier integrity will require further study. So they're not even sure how those cells help. But they're saying KD met more of these cells for some reason, which helped, which could just be false. From what I've seen so far, it's completely compatible with KD met more of these cells. None of these cells is bad, but fewer of these cells was not the problem in the non-KD mice. I think it seems compatible so far. And it seems, yeah, if they didn't think of that, I would consider that like really bad. Okay, investigator blinding during experiments was impossible. It's not literally impossible. Like, they're kind of making an excuse, but it's much harder. So I understand why they didn't do it, but you certainly could do it. you could make the mice like eat out of a box, a black box, and the investigators would be like unable to know which box each mice had. And on top of that, you could do things like, okay, so maybe the boxes are different weights, so you could add weights to one of the boxes, and you can get them to feel identical. And on top of that, you could have like assistants move all the boxes so that the investigators, the people actually doing the research, never touch the boxes. They only see the outsides. You just have to make the outsides look identical. And maybe you have to make the outsides sound identical when the mice like bump into them or something. I don't know. It's hard to be perfect, but you could do better if you tried. So I don't like it when they're making excuses and they call something impossible. It's not impossible. Like, you didn't do it. You made a choice not to do it because it was hard. Okay, so they de-identified genotypes and diagrams. So basically they're saying when they crunched the data, they didn't know which mice were which. When deciding on the algorithms, something like that. Experiments were repeated independently at least 3 times. How independently? What do they mean by independently? Like, because if there's someone in charge who says, we need 3 different people to do this experiment, here's the experiment. Like, those are not fully independent experiments. There's the common factor of the guy in charge telling them all what to do. It's only partially independent. Like, by independent, they mean different personnel, different equipment, different mice, different lab, different location. But, like, all having the same instructions about what to do, something like that. Wait, purchased from the Jackson laboratory? Or was it not independent? Did all at least 3 different independent tests all use mice from the Jackson laboratory? No other laboratory mice were used? There's a single source of mice? That's not fucking independent. Like, what the fuck? Stuff like this is so bad. This is why, like, I complain about science. Like, they're giving a single source after saying that the experiments were all independent. Using the same source of mice for every experiment is not independent. That's like a single point of failure where if the mice from that particular seller had an issue, some sort of bias or whatever, you have a problem, you get fucked. What, do I need to go back? I don't know what just happened, but 36. So the mice from the particular single place they bought them were crossed with mice in a single lab to generate something. And then they used a Yale animal facility. It's unclear to me if they actually even had 3 different labs do even part of the study. I don't know what they mean by independently. Maybe they just mean the experiments were independent of each other. Like, they got different mice and they started again and they're just like, we're going to do this 3 times in a row in different rooms or something. Like, how they give so little detail about what they actually did. It's ridiculous. Like, they have quite a bit of a budget. They're putting a lot of work into this. They should document it so much better. It's unreasonable how badly they document it and what people publish. Like, we have the fucking internet. We're not limited by paper and length. No reason that they couldn't have, like, hundreds of pages of documentation of exactly what they did. And just say, and here's all the details. Step by step. But they just don't do that, and it's ridiculous. So, like, this is another thing. All the mice were susceptible to 12-hour light dark cycles, apparently. That's not independent. They're all getting the same thing. That's not... If you're doing 3 independent experiments, you have like 3 different groups of people using their own daylight cycles instead of standardized ones. Like, they'd each just choose it independently. When they're all using the same cycle, that's not independent. Ad libitum? As much or as often as necessary. I think what they're saying is they gave the mice unlimited food. So that throws it off, because that's not how humans actually use regular eating or KD eating. Humans eating regularly or keto do not just eat as much as they want. They don't just have unlimited food. So that's already like a huge difference from how humans eat. All they're saying is they gave the mice unlimited amounts of different types of food. Some of the mice got like cat food or whatever, you know? It's like some of the mice got cat food and some got meat, and the ones that ate meat did better. And they both could have as much as they wanted. Like, maybe one of the other groups overate or something. Maybe they mentioned overeating earlier. I don't know. Purchased from research diets. This kind of info is really bad, by the way, because, like, research diets probably updates the food they sell sometimes. It doesn't actually tell you enough about what to feed them. Oh, look, Purina. I said cat food, and they're feeding them Purina. They're feeding them fucking saccharin. Like, This is not a like neutral, natural mice diet or whatever. This, right, this sugar substitute. So they're feeding the mice like a fake sugar. And they're using that as their control. I don't think that's reasonable. They say replace daily, but before they said provided as much as they need. Maybe daily, maybe this amount of food daily is more than mice will eat. I do not know. Go to the beginning, search for HFD. Standard high-fat diet. Oh, so they said keto beat high-fat. Okay, anyways, overall summary is they didn't really seem to take into account the issue I brought up earlier, that more of those lung cells might not be better, but more than 0 is important. I didn't see anything taking that into account. They just have a correlation. They don't have the causal mechanism. The keto thing seems like a bit of a trauma, so maybe it's kind of like a vaccine where you like get the body used to a specific problem in advance and then it deals with it better. But just overall, they don't really know what the issue is, and it's not surprising really that if you change something, it will be better in some ways and worse in other ways. So they happen to change it this way and you get a better response in this particular situation. So it could just be like random good luck, even if keto is worse on average. And giving a mouse a keto diet for 1 week is quite different than humans using keto long term. Also, they were comparing keto to high fat. I'm not actually sure what the difference is or what they mean by keto compared to high fat. So I think that maybe whatever they're doing, they're specifically saying it's not like a lot of high fat diets people use that they call keto. Like, I think they might be being pretty specific about what they mean by keto. They ordered a particular thing from that like research foods place or whatever. But I don't remember seeing anything that actually explains what the difference is, which is bad. They should be able to explain what they mean by keto and how it differs from high fat. But it seems like they just never explain. Particular case for whatever reason, maybe. But overall, I'd say not very good science. Well, how are they getting the mice to enter ketosis when they said that they give all the mice as much food as they want to eat? Like, if you're right, because the thing that they do differently between the mice was just what type of food they get. But I think it said they get all the food they want. So it wasn't like they were starving them to get them to enter ketosis, I don't think. Like, I don't think they were making the mice actually diet. It was just that they were feeding them different foods. Because it says, yeah, they said they provided the diets ad libitum, which means as much or as often as necessary or desired. So I thought that meant unlimited food. They should probably not use fancy Latin words for key information and just say what they mean in plain English. That is bad of them.